series. It's your boy Osas, and in today's episode, we are going to write, deploy, and test our Firebase push notification services. Obviously, in the last couple of episodes, we set up the authentication and the Firebase admin SDK and the Firebase CLI tools. In today's episode, we are going to be using that Firebase admin SDK to write and deploy our Firebase cloud functions that's going to be responsible for sending push notifications to our users. And so essentially, what's going to happen is we need to set up Firebase cloud functions, which are these super cool tools that allows us to be able to listen to specific events in our database. And for example, whenever a user sends a message into a channel, we would like to be able to send push notification to all of the members in that channel. And Firebase Cloud Functions allows us to be able to do that. And in order for us to be able to do that, we also need to set up something known as FCM token. We already did some of that in our authentication section of this push notification module, but I'm going to go ahead and explain it to you in a much plainer terms. So the terminology I always like to use whenever I'm describing push notifications to new iOS developer is you can think of push notification as the postal service, right? Let's say, for example, you wanted to send a letter to your girlfriend in France. Generally speaking, you would need to know the postal address of your girlfriend for you to be able to deliver the mail successfully, right? Same logic actually applies to push notification. Before we can send push notification to a specific user device, we need to know the FCM token of that user's device. And the way we do that is thanks to the Firebase messaging library that basically helps us handle FCM token. And we're going to need to set that up in this episode. And then after we do that, we're going to store it in our database and use that FCM token to deliver those push notification payload to the user's device. So let us jump right into Xcode and get started with our focus for today. And so as you can see in the to-do list, we need to have, decode, and store the FCM token. We need to write our Firebase Cloud Functions, which is going to be responsible for listening for new messages and sending all of those information to our chat partners. And then we're going to deploy those push notifications, or well, those Firebase Cloud Functions. We're going to deploy them, and then we're going to test them. And then at the end, we're going to talk about optimizations. So as you can see, we have a lot of things to cover today. But like I said, let us get started with the first thing on our agenda. So I'm going to jump into our WhatsApp app, basically where we have our app delegate file. And the first thing we need to set up is this push notification FCM token. So let's go right ahead and run our project, and let's make sure everything is actually working as expected. So this is a must. It's important that we get our APNS device token whenever we run our device. So right now, as you can see on the console, I'm actually getting mine. You can see I'm getting the APNS device token and this is from this message right here, from this log or this print statement right here. So make sure you're getting your print statement in the deed receive registration token, because this is responsible for our FCM token. If for whatever reason you're not getting this print statement, I would recommend that you jump out of your simulator, you delete the application, and you click on this X button right here to basically reboot your simulator and then run your project all over again. Because sometimes I get that bug on simulators where I'm just not getting my FCM token. So if you're not getting your FCM token in the prints or in the console, make sure you just cancel your iOS simulator and rerun your application again, and that should solve it. And as I said, if I put the log here, the filter, as you can see, I'm getting the FCM token. This is awesome. Well, we also need to go add this FCM token to our user. But the first thing I want us to do is to actually store the FCM token in the backend. So essentially, each user, just again, using the postal service analogy, each user is going to have a specific address. And address in this case is analogous to FCM token. So we need to store that FCM token in our backend, as you can imagine. And the way I'm just going to do that is by storing it in our database. I'm going to say Firebase user ref, the child. We need to get our current user ID. So I'm going to say God let current UID is equals to auth.auth, the current user, the UID, else return out of the scope. Okay, I would also like for us to unwrap this FCM token because it is optional. So I'm going to say let FCM token is equals to FCM token. And then I'm going to pass in this current UID. And then I'm going to go into the FCM token node. So right now we don't currently have an FCM token because, like I said, we did not set this up at the beginning of the project, and that was intentional because I wanted to fully explain what is going on to you guys. So now I'm going to take this FCM token, I'm going to set the value, and the value is just going to be the FCM token right here that we're getting from our delegate method of deed receive registration token. So with this, we're going to be able to store it in our backend. And let's go right ahead and run our projects, make sure everything is working, and let us go check our backend, our database node, to make sure we're actually storing this FCM token in the backend. So I'm going to jump right in here, and I'm going to jump into my real-time database. Let's see, who am I currently logged in as? I'm currently logged in as QA user 3. So I'm going to go get the user ID for QA user 3, my authentication. I'm just going to say QA user 3 at test.com. I mean, that depends on whoever you're currently logged in as, so make sure you validate that. I'm going to copy that UID. I'm going to jump back to my real-time database. I'm going to go into my users node, and I'm just going to command an F, paste in the QA user, and look at that. That's my QA user 3. So if I jump in here, look at that, guys. We have FCM token, and we have stored our FCM token successfully. So which is awesome, guys. And now the next thing I want us to do is to also store it in our user model, right? Because I would like for us to be able to decode it and have access to it whenever we're in a specific instance of our application. So I'm going to Command Shift and O, and I'm going to jump into user item, which is our user model in Swift, and I'm going to create an FCM token right here. I'm going to say var FCM token because I want to store it in this specific model, and it's just going to be an optional string. Okay, so now we're going to need to go decode it inside of our dictionary right here. And as always, I'm going to create a key here. So I'm going to copy the static. I'm just going to call this FCM token Okay, paste this FCM token right in here, and let us use this to decode it inside of our dictionary. So I'm just going to say self.fcm token is equals to dictionary. We know it's inside of the dictionary, and the key we're going to use to access it is the FCM token static property that we just created. And we know it's going to be an optional string, and if it's not available, we're going to default it to nil. And so now that we have our FCM token, we're going to be able to get it inside of our user item. So each user now has an FCM token. Let's go right ahead and run our project, and let's make sure everything is still compiling as expected. Let's also print let's jump into our authentication manager and print this just to make sure we're actually decoding this FCM token. So I'm going to Command Shift and O, and I'm going to jump into the auth manager, and let me expand this all the way. And right here, when we're doing our auto login, I would like for us to, where we're fetching current user, I'm going to jump into that method. I would like for us to print the FCM token for the current user. And I'm just going to say, you know what, I'm going to copy this print statement, paste it right here, and I'm going to say FCM token is, and it's just going to be logged in user. We're going to use logged in user.fcm token. Go right ahead and run our project, and I'm going to jump out of Xcode. Let's make sure we're getting that FCM token printed right here up on login, and it says QA user 3 is logged in, but it's not giving me the FCM token. Let me run this again just to make sure it's doing that. Let's wait for the simulator, and let's see. So it says QA user 3 is logged in, QA user 3's FCM token is which is awesome. That's exactly the FCM token that we just stored in our backend right here. So that's awesome, guys. Let's jump back to our project. The one thing I also want us to mention is in an actual environment, in an actual production app, right, before you deploy your app, you would actually have to go back and have this FCM token. You'd have to run some sort of a migration. And it's pretty easy, and perhaps I'll talk about that towards the end of this episode, but you need to run some sort of migration that helps you add FCM token to all of your users in your backend. For example, I have like over 50 test users. So for me to be able to get push notifications to all of those 50 users anytime they send messages in our app, we would need to add FCM token to all of them in the database. But this is good for now, and we know everything is working. So it's time for us to actually, move our logic to the Firebase Cloud Functions logic. So I'm going to jump into our Node.js file that we created in the last episode, which is responsible for our admin SDK. So I'm going to open my Visual Studio Code, and I already have everything open. And remember, I'm inside of my WhatsApp clone app and inside of the backend folder. And right here, I'm inside of my index.js file. And if you remember in the last episode, we deployed our Hello World HTTPS Firebase Cloud Function, which is awesome. It's still working. Today, we need to deploy a Firebase Cloud function that is going to listen for new messages in a channel and then send push notifications to all of the members of that channel. And so I'm going to jump into to-do list in my Xcode and show you what we need to do in order for that to happen. So the first thing we need to do is, of course, listen for new messages. And then we need to know who's sending the message, right? We need to get the message sender's name because we're going to be using that to compose the title of our push notification. And then we need to go get all the specific members that belongs to that specific channel that the message was sent into. And then after we're done with that, we're going to get the FCM token, which again, remember the analogy of postal service is like your address. And then we're going to use that FCM token and give that to Apple push notification service to help us deliver the push notification to the specific device. And after all of that, we're going to deploy things and we're going to manually test them to see how it's working. So let's go right ahead and let's take this right here because we're going to use this to break things down. And I'm going to jump back to VS Code and I'm just going to put this right here and I'm just going to comment it out just so I could use it as a reference. And so what's the first thing that we need to do? Well, we need to create, I'm going to say one, I'm just going to copy this. We need to listen for messages in a channel. And it's pretty simple. Like I said, Cloud Functions allows us to do this relatively easily. And let's see, the first thing we need to do is right up here, I've already imported my functions. I've already imported my, and honestly, I don't even need V1. I'm just going to say functions, Command and S. And I already have my admin SDK. I'm already initializing the app. And I'm going to remove the onRequest one. I don't really need that. I have my logger. That is good. Okay, let's go ahead and create a function that's going to listen for new messages. And I'm just going to call it new message a lot. I don't know. I think that's a good name. And we're going to use the functions. Remember, this function is coming from this constant where we're importing it from Firebase functions module. And so all we need to do here is, we're going to export it. This is how we're exporting it so we could deploy it to our backend. And we're going to say database. We want to access the database node and the database module. And then the reference, if you think about it, for anytime a new message is created, and let me jump into my Firebase real-time database node. Anytime a new message is sent, right, it's going to be inside of this channel messages, right? Because it's going to be added underneath the channel ID. So it's going to be created right here or right here. And so all we're doing right here is we're going to go into channel messages, we're going to go into channel ID and then message ID and then listen for that message. And so the way to do that is we're just going to say reference. And for me to make this easier on us, let's see, what do I want to do? I'm just going to store the reference right up here. So I'm going to create a constant. And by the way, this is JavaScript. Just follow along. It's relatively intuitive. If you've never written JavaScript before, it's not that difficult of a language. And I'm just going to call this channel, let's see, message ref. So I'm declaring a constant here. And the channel message ref, the path for us is, like I said, is basically a channel dash messages. and then it's our channel ID. So this is called a wildcard. And this is, for example, when you're using child by auto ID, which is exactly what we're using for our channel ID. And then we have message ID. So that's how you do this. And you can also read up on Firebase documentation on things like this. It's pretty straightforward. And so essentially, like I said, we're going to channel messages, and you can see the name matches. So you have to make sure whatever you're calling your node matches whatever you're calling it right here, because it's very case sensitive. So channel messages, and then we're going into the channel ID, which is a wildcard. It's a child by auto ID, and then a message ID, and then that's the message. So I'm going to take this channel message ref, pass this into our reference parameter, and then the next thing I want to do is the onCreate. So this is the trigger I was talking about earlier for Firebase Cloud Functions. They have this listeners. So we're going to listen for whenever a new message is created, and we know this is going to be async. So I'm just going to say async here, and let's see, what else do I want to do? I know it's going to take in a snapshot, and it's going to give us a context, and let's go right ahead and return this bad boy. Okay, so let's first grab the data that was created. So I'm going to say const data is equals to, this is basically the message data that was just created, snapshot.value. And by snapshot.value, all I'm referring to right here is, for example, let's say a new channel was created, all of this data in here, the owner UID, the timestamp, the type, all that cool stuff. Okay, so now that we have the data, the next thing that we need to do, let me bump this up a little bit for you guys. That feels a little too much. I think this is good. So the next thing I need to do is, so we have our data, and I think this is not equal. So data is equals to snapshot.value. And now the next thing I'm going to create is, I'm going to get the channel ID, which is just going to be equals to the context, the params, dot channel ID. We're just basically getting this channel ID, this wild ID right here. And in this case, it's basically we're doing channel messages paths. This is the channel ID. So we grab that channel ID through the parameters, which is inside of this parameter right here. And what else do we need to get? And I'm going to get the message that was sent. So message that was sent is essentially equals to data. And in this case, we're going to listen for text. And so if, remember when we're sending text messages, we have this text field right here called text. Not all of them have text, but look at this one. This one has text right there. And so that's perfect. The next thing we would like to get is, let's get the owner UID, essentially who's sending the message. And you can call it sender UID, honestly, whichever one is okay. And so the sender UID, or the owner UID, as I'm calling it right here, I believe we called it an owner UID in our backend as well. And let us just validate, because these things are very case sensitive. And so we are calling it owner UID, exactly. Okay, so we have all of this data extracted when a message is created. What do we need to do? Well, we need to go get the message sender name, like I said right here. And I'm just going to put that right here, get message sender name. And the way we're going to do that is, we're going to need to make a database read operation. And thankfully, the Firebase, Cloud Function SDK allows us to be able to also write read operations. It's pretty simply. And the way we're going to do that is, we're just going to say const, let's see, I'm going to say message owner, or message sender snapshot. I already said snap. Yeah, snapshot, message sender snapshot, and we're just going to await admin. And by admin, we're referring to this admin right here, which is again from the Firebase admin SDK. And we're just going to say admin, await admin, and I'm just going to access the database and database.reference. And in this case, we want to go to the users node and get the username for that specific ID. So essentially, we want to jump. So we get the channel, right? A message is created, channel ID, message ID. We get the person who's sending the message. We get their owner ID, which is like a reference. And then we use this owner ID to jump into our users node. And then we go find out what their username is. And that username is what we're going to use as the title of our push notification. And so hopefully that's clear. So then the reference path is users. And I'm just going to use this style of, let's see, I need the owner UID, which is right here. Okay, so now that I have that owner UID, all I want to do is I just want to read it once. I just want to get the value once, so it's going to be value, and it's once. And now I'm going to go right ahead and decode this snapshot as well. Oh, okay, I misspelled it. Snapshot, yep. Okay, so now I'm going to use this message sender snapshot, and I'm going to get the value from it. So I'm just going to say const message sender dictionary is equals to message sender snapshot dot value. Okay, and now let's get the username out of that message dictionary. So message sender dictionary is equals to message owner. So message sender name, not message owner. So sender name is equals to this message sender dictionary. We're going to use the key of username to get that value. And really what I'm doing right here is I'm jumping into the users node and I'm saying, this is the username key, get me the actual username of that user. And in our case, whenever we send push notification, it's basically whoever sent this message. And so now that we have the sender name, what do we need to do? Well, we need to go get the channel members, because remember, there could be more than one members in a specific channel, especially in the case of a group channel. And so just to make this a little bit more readable, I'm going to go right ahead and create another, function right here. And I'm just going to create an asynchronous function. So let me just paste this right up here. And this is get channel members. So for us to get the channel members, remember, inside of our database node, inside of our channels node, so not channel messages, this time around the channels node, right? We have member UIDs right here. And that's basically the pointer to all of the members inside of a specific channel. So that's what we need to do now. And how do we do that? Well, I'm just going to write an asynchronous function right here, a asynchronous JavaScript function. And I'm just going to say get channel members. And get channel members, let's take in the channel ID. And let's take in let's take in the message, and let's also take in the sender name. All right, boys and girls, what do we want to do now? Well, we need to also run a database operation. We need to go to the, we need to go to the channels node, and then channel ID, and then the members UID. So this is relatively simple. I'm just going to copy all of this because it's quite similar, paste it right here. And instead of message sender snapshot, I'm just going to call this the channel snapshot. And the channel snapshot is database, await, and again, this is the channels. And we're going to use this channel ID that we're getting in here inside of our parameter of our function. And then we're also going to read once, and then I'm going to say const channel dictionary. So let's pass it. The channel dictionary is going to be our channel snapshot.value. And what else do we need? So now let us get the members UID out of it. So essentially I'm going channels, channel ID, member UIDs, and let me copy this because again, this is case sensitive. And I'm just going to say member UIDs is equals to our channel dictionary. I'm going to use the key, the string key of channel member UIDs. So this is going to be an array because look at it right here. It's an array 0, 1. And if you remember when we did this on the Swift side a couple of episodes ago. So what do we need to do with this member UIDs now? Well, I'm just going to loop through this bad boy. And this is how you loop in JavaScript. I'm just going to say user ID. So I want to get all of the user ID from the member UIDs. And then I'm going to actually go get the FCM token for each one of those bad boys. So I'm just going to create another asynchronous function just to make things easier. And I'm just going to copy this right here, get FCM token for each members, just paste it right here. And I'm just going to say async function. And this one is going to be called, what's a good name for this? Perhaps get FCM token. I think that's a good name, get FCM token. And let us take in all of the same similar parameters. We want message, we want user ID, we want sender name. And I think that's good. And it's all going to make sense by the time we're done. So we need to go get the FCM token. And the way we're going to get FCM token is also inside of our, let's see, FCM token is also inside of our users node. So let me close the channels node. So look at this. We actually just did this just now. Not every user has FCM token because remember, we just added FCM token to our currently logged in user. So all we're doing is we're going into the users node. You can see that, users. We're going into the specific user ID, and then we're going to look for the FCM token field. So if this field is empty for whatever reason, we can't send push notification because again, using the analogy of a postal service, if you don't know the postal address, you can't deliver the message. And so hopefully that's clear. Let's go right ahead and do that. Again, it's going to be similar logic. So I'm just going to copy all of this bad boys. Be careful with copy and pasting things. Obviously, you can make a lot of mistakes here, but just to save us some time. So I'm going to say this is user snapshot, which makes sense. And the database path in this instance is going to be the users and the user ID, because remember, we're going to be getting the user ID parameter from our get FCM token method. So I'm just going to say get, let me call this get user FCM token. That's a better descriptive name. And also, we only want to read it once. We just want to get that specific value. And in this time around, the dictionary, we're going to call it the user dictionary, and this is going to be our user snapshot.value, right? And then we need to get the FCM token. And so the FCM token is just going to be, let me say FCM token in lowercase or camel case. And this is going to be our user dictionary because remember, this is our user dictionary, all of this guy, key value pair. And we're going to use the FCM token key. So this is a string and the value is also a string. So we're just going to say FCM token. Let's make sure that it's correctly spelled. Yep, FCM token. And let us save our project. And the way you save in VS Code, if you're not familiar with this, is just you tap Command and S, and it's going to save. And when something is not saved, you have that dot, that little dot up there. So just Command and S, and that saves that project. So let's continue. So we have our SCM token. We're almost done, guys. The last bit of the equation is let us go send the actual push notification. So I'm going to also create this in a different method of its own because it's just more readable. And again, let's make it an asynchronous function. And let's see, what do we want to call this? Let's call this async function, send push notifications. And let us take in, let's see, message, let us take in sender name, and let us take in the FCM token, which is which specific device, the device address that we want to deliver this notification to. But before we do anything, let's actually call the functions that we have set up so far. So let's scroll up here. Inside of our initial function, the actual new message alert or listen for new messages. Maybe we should call it listen for new messages. I think that's actually a better name. Okay, so inside of our listen for new messages, and whenever we are done with actually getting our sender name, we need to call something, right? And all we're just going to do is we're going to call the get message get channel members, await get channel members. And remember, the get channel member is right here. It has 3 parameters, and you can over it, and it's going to show you it has a channel ID, a message, and a sender name. And the channel ID is right here, which we already have inside of our parameters here. We're going to pass that in. And we also need the message, and the message is, let's see, did we already get the message? Yep, the message is the text right there. So we're going to pass in the message, and then we need the sender name, which we already got right here. So it's exactly what it sounds like. Who's actually sending the push notification, right? And so let us clean things up a little bit just to make it more readable, and I'm going to save my project again with Command and S. And so let's go call the other function. So instead of our get channel members, we need to call the get FCM token method. So this is going to go get FCM token for each of our members, and then the get FCM token method is going to go send push notification for each of those members. And so inside of here, all we need to do is say, let's see, so we need to do await get FCM, get, what did we call it? Get FCM, get user FCM token. Yeah, right here. And this takes in 3 parameters. It takes in a message, a user ID, and a sender name. And so we have a message right up here from our parameter. Pass that in there. No, message, not sender name, message. And then we also need the user ID. And the user ID, remember, is inside of this loop because the member UID is an array of the user IDs that belong to a specific channel. And so the last bit is the sender name. And the sender name is going to come from right up here, the parameter that we're injecting or passing into this get channel methods, get channel members method. And the sender name is coming from right here. It's like who's sending the push notification. And so now, once we call this get FCM token method, this FCM token method is now going to fire the send push notification method. So all I'm going to do right up here, right down here is I'm going to say, let me clean up this a little bit, and I'm just going to say await send push notifications. And that takes in 3 parameters. It takes in it takes in a message, sender name, and FCM token. So I'm going to go ahead and pass in the message because we have the message coming in as well. I'm going to pass in the sender name because we also have that coming in as well. And what else do we need? We need the FCM token, and we have an FCM token right here for that specific user. So let's save things, clean up our code base a little bit, and let's go send a push notification. So sending push notification requires 2 things. Like I said, we need the FCM token, and then, which is like the postal address, like I used the postal office analogy. But then we also need the payload. The payload is like, you can think of it as it's the actual letter that you're sending to your girlfriend, or in this case, it's the actual push notification message we want to send. So let's go ahead and construct that letter or payload using that analogy. So I'm going to say payload, and payload is going to be an object. And the object consists of a bunch of different properties. The first property is the notification property, and then the APNS property, and then the token property. So let's go ahead and create each one. So the notification property is, the key is notification. It's also an object, and then we want to pass in the title and the body. I think this sounds pretty self-explanatory. And the title is going to be the sender name. It's essentially who's sending the message. And then for the body, this is the message that you're actually sending, right? So I'm going to pass in the message, and I made a mistake. Okay, yep, message. And the message right here is coming from our parameter right here, and so is the sender name. Okay, so that's one of the notification title. That's part of the payload. The other thing that we need to create inside of our payload is the APNS, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's our Apple push notification services. This is where we're going to configure or style how we want our push notifications to be delivered. So for example, if you want your push notification to be delivered with a sound, you need to have it here. If you want your push notifications to have a badge, so for example, if I jump into my simulator, this is one of the other projects, right? You see that badge that says 12 right there? If you wanted to have a badge of the actual notification count, well, you would need to have that inside of this APNS object. And so let's see, the APNS object also has a payload. I know it's kind of like super nested. And you can also read up on this if you just Google Apple push notification services. The documentation is pretty available on Apple developer website. And so the payload also takes in an APS. I know, guys, it's super nested, but this is just the way we do it these days. And then we're going to take in the sound, and the sound we're going to use as default. And by the way, you can actually use a different sound besides the defaults. Maybe I will make a tutorial on this some other time, but it's pretty simple. And then we're going to pass in the badge, like I said. And in this case, the badge generally should be dynamic. It should be the actual notification count, but I'm just going to put something static. Let's just put something like 12, or maybe put something like 5, right? Let's just put something like 5, and that's pretty simple. And then, again, remember, we're still in the notification, we're still in the payload object. And after the APNS, we need to pass in the actual token, which again, like I said, it's where are we going to deliver it, the specific device. So I'm going to pass in the FCM token that we're getting from right here, and we're getting it from the get, FCM token method. And so with that done, let's go right ahead and actually call the postman. And this is where we're going to basically trigger Apple push notification services. We're basically going to tell Firebase Cloud Messaging to go send this to, using Apple push notification service. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use the admin SDK. We're going to use the messaging module, and we're going to use the send messaging. So make sure you initialize it, and we're going to say send, and it's going to say, what are we sending? We're just sending the payload, right? And for me, because this is a try, I would like for us to console, and I want to console.info so we can see if we actually successfully sent the push notification. So you can think of this as we're trying to track our letter. So I'm going to say successfully sent a message, and I want to know the message that we sent. It's going to put a comma, message, and I'm going to put a catch block right here. And let's see, I'm going to pass in an error, and boom, boom, and I'm going to console.log, but not log, but I want to use the error. So console.error, command and save, but this time around I'm going to say error, sending message, and I want to know what the error is. So I think that's pretty much everything we need. Again, make sure you tap Command and S, because if you don't save it, you can't actually do anything. So this is essentially our entire JavaScript method. And this is, in Node.js, which is a JavaScript runtime environment. We can now deploy this to our Firebase backend, and it's going to help us send push notification whenever you send a message inside of the channel. So I'm going to explain this pretty quickly, but actually before I explain it, let's even just see it in action. I always prefer to just see things in action because it just makes it easier for you to know what's going on. So I'm going to go right ahead and let me scroll back up here. Sorry if that is confusing. Make sure I'm calling all the methods. I am. And let's go right ahead and actually deploy it. So we've written the logic. We need to actually deploy it to our Firebase backend. Remember, we deployed that Hello World program a while ago, and I'm actually going to go ahead and remove that. So exports to Hello World. I don't care about that. I'm just going to comment it out, hit that save, and let's go right ahead and deploy this bad boy. And the way to deploy it is, right now I'm inside of my WhatsApp clone backend. I'm inside of my backend directory. And the way to deploy this is just to say Firebase. Let's see. You just say Firebase deploy dash only functions. I don't know if you guys can see that. Let me blow that bad boy up a little bit just so you can see what I'm working with. And so right now I'm inside of my WhatsApp clone directory, inside of the backend directory, and I'm just basically saying Firebase deploy dash only functions. And again, if you don't know how to get into this, all you need to do is just jump into, let me actually show you how to jump into this really quickly. Well, you know what? I'm sure you guys are smart enough to figure this out. Just make sure you're in your backend directory and let's deploy this bad boy. So just Firebase deploy dash only functions. If you're confused about how to get to the backend directory from VS Code, please let me know. If not, I'm sure you can figure it out. And all you got to do is hit that enter button and let's see this bad boy in action. So let's see the magic. It's doing its thing. It's doing its thing. It's serving up these nice cloud functions, and it's going to take a couple of seconds. And now it's asking us if we want to delete a previous Firebase cloud function. And so it's basically asking us if we want to delete this hello world. You can see it right here. The following functions are found in your project but do not exist in your source code. Yes, we want to delete it. So the way to do that is just press Y. Just enter Y on your keyboard and press enter. And it's going to delete that bad boy. And let's wait for this to deploy, and we're going to test everything to make sure it is working. So it is deleting the actual hello world cloud functions that we wrote in the last episode, and I think it's finally starting to upload the recent one that we just did. Okay, so after a couple of seconds to minutes, I don't think it should take minutes, but after a couple of seconds, you should get the success message. If you don't, you're probably having some issue with your syntax, and please basically go over everything we just did again. And so right now you can see it says, we've basically successfully deployed our Firebase cloud function. The one thing it's also telling us is we should delete this image really quickly. So I'm going to command and just, click on this, and let's go delete this image in our Firebase GCP. I think it's called the console. So this GCF artifact, I'm going to click on that and I'm going to click delete just because we don't want them to bill us on that. And let's jump into our Firebase Cloud Functions console and let's make sure that we actually have this bad boy working. So if you're in your Firebase project console, go to the functions and we should see that new method that we just deployed. Look at that, guys. Listen for new messages. Voila. All right. Before we do anything, there's something we need to set up really quickly for us to actually be able to test. So I'm going to run another simulator that has an FCM token so that we can actually send messages and validate that everything is working. So I'm going to command and click on this, jump on iPhone 15 Plus and run this bad boy. Now I'm going to have two simulators running just so I could see and make sure everything is working as expected. And so let's wait for this bad boy. And so this should also create an FCM token for QA user 3 because remember, or QA user 27. Because remember, QA user 27, let me actually validate that real quickly. And I'm going to jump to authentication, jump to QA. So the other one that we have here is what? This is QA user 3. So the logged in user, and the other one is QA user 27 at tests.com. So I'm in my authentication module right now. I just want to get the user ID. And now I'm going to jump to my real-time database, jump to my users node, and I'm going to command an F again, paste that bad boy so I can see whatever the UID is, jump in here, and look at that, guys. We have that FCM token. So awesome. So these two simulators have FCM tokens. So that means they should be able to receive push notifications. Let's go ahead and test what we just wrote. So I'm going to click on QA user 3. And remember, I'm currently logged in as QA user 3 on this device right now. But I'm going to kill it just because I want to see how it's going to work when it's in, background mode. So I'm going to hit a couple of send a couple of messages. Let's see what happens. Oh, look at that, guys. And it even gets the message. You see that? It says QA user 27, which, let me see. We're currently logged in as QA user 27. That is awesome. And let me send a message from this bad boy to, QA user, where are we logged in here? We're logged in as QA user 27. Let me send a message from QA user 3. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to just give it something like, hey there, hit that send button. Let's see what happens. Look at that. We get a message here. Hey there as well. And obviously, let's kill this and put it in background mode. Let's just kill it entirely. And let's send in a message. Let's see what happens. Hit the send button. We get that notification. We get the sound. We get everything. It looks super beautiful, guys. And obviously, whenever you're in a group chat, it's going to do the same thing. But make sure that the actual members of that group chat have an FCM token. So you have to make sure they have an FCM token. If it's not delivering push notification and your cloud function is working, it's probably because your FCM token has expired or you don't even have an FCM token for that specific user stored in your backend. So this kind of concludes this episode. And I'm going to do a quick recap and explain exactly what's going on so you guys have a good understanding. And then I'm going to talk about optimizations, what we're going to be doing and focusing on in the next episode. So essentially the way push notifications work, as I said, using that postal office analogy is true, but let's get a little bit more into the technical details, right? So really what's going on is we're jumping into our Firebase backend. So let me jump right in here. Inside of our Firebase, real-time database, these cloud functions that we just created in Node.js, these bad boys right here. Let me close my console. So these bad boys actually basically have listeners. And here's an example of a listener right here on create. There's multiple different versions of these bad boys, by the way. You can set a listener for creation, for deletion, for updating, whatever you want. You can look it up on Firebase documentation. So this onCreate listener is almost like a trigger. It's just listening for whenever a new data is created. So it's listening inside of this channel messages node, because remember this messages node is what's responsible whenever we send a message from our app if I can find it, whenever we send a message from inside of a channel, this channel messages node is what is responsible for all of these messages. It actually houses the messages. So we listen for new message creation. Once that new message is created, and let me show you what I mean. Let me actually hit this. Let's create a message. Let's send. So inside of this channel right here, with that message that was just created, essentially those cloud functions, they're super fast, right? Milliseconds. They essentially listen for new channel creation. Once that not new channel, I'm sorry guys, new message creation. Once that message is created, right, following our logic, essentially what we do is we get the message sender's name. And the way we do that is we go to the user's node using the user ID, right? And then when we do that, we go and get all the channel members that belongs to that specific channel. So if this channel has, for example, 5 channel members or 6 channel members, we go get all of those members, and then we send each one of those members push notification like, hey, there's a new message in this group chats. And when you think about it, it's pretty simple and straightforward. And so using this combination of like Google Cloud messaging and Apple push notification, we're able to synchronize this messaging functionality. And the APNS, or the authorization part of it, is happening inside of our app delegates. So inside of our app delegates, we're conforming to 2 specific objects. We're conforming to the notification center delegates and the messaging delegates. The messaging delegate is a Firebase provided object essentially. And it's essentially what's responsible for this FCM token. And so when we get that FCM token, we're storing it in our backend, right? Because we want to be able to access it. When we store it in our backend, what do? Well, then we go right ahead and let's see. We also decode it in our users, and you're going to see this in the next episode because we're actually going to use this in the next episode. But when we store it in our backend, this FCM token is essentially what we're now using inside of our Node.js, our JavaScript file right here. Whenever we do that token, this is the FCM token that we're using to actually send that specific payload. So I hope that was very clear. Another thing that I want to point out to you really quickly is you can also debug your push notifications or your Firebase Cloud Functions by just going to your GCP console. So you just click on this dot right here. You go to functions in your console, you click on view logs, and when you jump in here, you can see everything that's going on in your Firebase Cloud Function. And so that's why it's very good to have those log that I just showed you guys, because you can actually see it says successfully sent message, A there, successfully sent message, aha. You can see everything, and if there's an error, it would tell you. However, there's one thing to wrap all of this up that I wanted to bring our attention to. So this is one way of sending push notifications. Obviously, this is like not perfect because there's a couple of things we could do, but we're actually doing a lot of read operations in my opinion. And there's a better way. There's a more optimized or sneaky way for us to do this without having to go get all of this information that we're getting on the server side. Because we're essentially, we're basically giving all the work to our Firebase Cloud Function. And there's no reason for us to do that. We can actually do some of those work on the client side. And it's going to be significantly faster and in my opinion, maybe even cheaper because we're not running all these cloud functions to get, for example, the username, get the FCM token. We can get all of those informations on the back end, in the client side. And then whenever we fire this, cloud function trigger, we're only going to run basically 1 or 2 methods. So right now we're doing like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different things before we can send push notifications. In the next episode, I'm going to show you guys how I would probably approach something like this, or how I generally do things like this when I'm building applications for myself using Firebase. And it's essentially to just add a couple of more fields to our data models and use those fields to house all this data that we are fetching on the server side right now. So hopefully you guys are learning a lot. Hopefully you guys are having fun. If you have any questions or if you ran into any errors on this episode, please leave a comment below. If not, please like and subscribe, guys. I really appreciate the love and support, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.